In America, where freedom rings hollow for some, racial discrimination still lurks in every corner of society, even at our nation's airports. This story exposes the ugly reality faced by people of color when traveling, where their mere presence can trigger suspicion, hostility, and humiliation. What follows is not just a tale of injustice, but a stark reminder of how quickly prejudice can strip away dignity and rights until power shifts unexpectedly. Eleanor Campbell, a white woman in her 60s dripping with diamonds and designer labels, her heavily made-up face twisted with displeasure as she surveyed the line, her gaze lingering judgmentally on Wilson. In Campbell's narrow worldview, a black woman couldn't possibly belong in business class. "The world's gone mad," Campbell muttered loudly enough for others to hear. "Everyone gets priority these days." Not content with passive aggression, Campbell approached the gate agent, her tone simultaneously demanding and falsely sweet. "Excuse me, why must I wait alongside those people?" She jerked her chin toward Wilson. "That woman looks suspicious. She's been watching my luggage. I don't feel safe flying with her kind. You should check her papers, they must be fraudulent." Morgan Wilson, a 50-year-old professional returning from a 3-day legal conference, stood near the front of the priority boarding line. Her appearance was understated yet refined: comfortable low-heeled shoes, a quality leather handbag placed neatly atop her suitcase, a simple watch, her only accessory. She traveled alone, without assistance or security, valuing her privacy after demanding professional days. The young gate agent tried explaining that Wilson had legitimate business-class privileges, but Campbell persisted. Her commotion attracted 2 passing airport officers, Officer Raymond Jackson and Officer Daniel Martinez. Campbell pounced on their arrival, her voice shifting from commanding to victimized. "Officers, thank goodness, that black woman keeps eyeing me and my belongings suspiciously. I'm frightened to board with her. Please investigate her thoroughly. We can't let dangerous elements onto aircraft." Without hesitation or investigation, Officer Jackson, older with a weathered face and implicitly biased perspective, accepted the wealthy white woman's claims. Officer Martinez, younger but equally eager to assert authority, joined his partner, both approaching Wilson with unmistakable hostility. "Ma'am," Jackson announced, his voice falsely neutral yet unmistakably disrespectful, "step out of line. We need to speak with you privately." Wilson, recognizing immediately what was happening, maintained her composure. She moved aside as requested, noticing Campbell's smug, triumphant expression. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" Wilson asked evenly. "We've received reports you're behaving suspiciously and may pose a security threat," Jackson stated bluntly, repeating Campbell's baseless accusations as established fact. "We need to inspect your identification and boarding pass." Wilson calmly retrieved her license and business-class boarding pass. "My documents are perfectly valid," she stated. "But I'd like to know what specific, suspicious behavior I'm accused of, and who made these allegations. I was simply waiting to board, like everyone else." Martinez interrupted aggressively. "Why so many questions? When police ask, you comply. Your attitude is suspicious." Jackson examined her documents with obvious skepticism, his gaze lingering on her professional attire and quality handbag. "Morgan Wilson," he muttered. "Business class?" A smirk crossed his face. "How does someone like you afford this ticket? What's your occupation? Are you certain this belongs to you?" The blatant racism broke Wilson's diplomatic reserve. Though anger coursed through her, she kept her voice controlled. "You're questioning me based on prejudice and someone else's slander, not evidence. My ticket class and profession are irrelevant within legal boundaries. I'm an American citizen and lawful passenger entitled to respect and equal treatment. Your questioning tone and attitude violate my civil rights and professional conduct standards." She extended her hand. "Return my documents immediately and provide your names and badge numbers." Her unwavering defiance infuriated the officers, accustomed to intimidating people of color into submission. "How dare you!" Martinez shouted, face flushing as he moved threateningly closer. "Who do you think you are? We represent the law here." Jackson's expression twisted with rage. "Insolent woman, playing amateur lawyer. We have authority to ensure security by any means necessary. Still want to make this flight, or prefer jail?" Their voices escalated to shouts, racial slurs echoing through the stunned gate area. Passengers watched in horrified silence as the officers hurled abuse at Wilson, who somehow maintained her dignity despite the public humiliation. "Your actions have crossed all boundaries," Wilson stated firmly. "You will answer for this misconduct to the fullest extent of the law." "Let's see about that," Jackson sneered. "You're under arrest for disturbing airport order, disobeying officers, and threatening flight safety." Martinez lunged forward, roughly grabbing Wilson's arms and wrenching them behind her back. The cold metal handcuffs clanked as he secured them tightly around her wrists, cutting into her skin while hundreds watched in disbelief. "Move!" Martinez ordered, shoving her forward. They marched Wilson through crowded corridors toward the airport police station, a humiliating procession under countless staring eyes. Campbell watched with undisguised satisfaction as her target was removed. At the police station, a duty officer began processing Wilson's information while Jackson and Martinez recounted their fabricated version of events, painting her as dangerous and uncooperative. "Occupation?" the duty officer asked routinely. Wilson straightened, her gaze sweeping from the officer to her captors with unflinching authority. Her voice rang clear and powerful. "I am Chief Judge Morgan Wilson of the Federal Court of Appeals." The room froze. The duty officer dropped his pen, mouth agape. Chief Judge of the Federal Court of Appeals, one of America's highest judicial authorities. He stared at the handcuffed black woman, then frantically verified her identification as cold sweat broke across his forehead. Jackson and Martinez's reaction was catastrophic. Their faces drained from angry red to ashen white. Their smug expressions vanished as the devastating realization hit them. They had racially profiled, verbally abused, and publicly handcuffed a federal appeals court judge, someone with the power to destroy their careers with a single ruling. Terror replaced arrogance. Jackson staggered backward while Martinez stood paralyzed, breathing in rapid gasps. "Chief Justice Wilson," Jackson stammered, voice barely audible. "We had no idea. A terrible misunderstanding. Unforgivable mistake." Martinez collapsed to his knees, tears streaming. "Please, Judge, forgive our ignorance. We only responded to complaints. Have mercy. Don't ruin us. We have families." Their pathetic pleas couldn't erase their cruelty. Judge Wilson stood immovable, unmoved by their desperate performance. She addressed the duty officer with commanding calm. "Remove these handcuffs immediately." He fumbled with the key, releasing the restraints from her reddened wrists. "Now," she continued, "contact your airport police chief and request his immediate presence. Also notify the U.S. Marshal's office." The reckoning had only begun. What price would these officers, and the woman who weaponized their prejudice, pay for their blind hatred? Justice was about to be served, far beyond what any of them could have imagined. Within hours of Judge Wilson's identity revelation, the storm broke. Airport security camera footage capturing every slur, every unnecessary shove, every moment of blatant discrimination was secured as evidence before anyone could tamper with it. The U.S. Marshal's office responded with unprecedented speed, treating the incident with the gravity it deserved. A federal judge had been unlawfully detained. By morning, both officers were suspended without pay pending investigation. By afternoon, their faces dominated local news. By evening, they had become the national emblems of law enforcement's ongoing racism crisis. The police union, typically quick to defend officers, maintained uncomfortable silence. The evidence was too damning, the target too powerful, the misconduct too flagrant to justify. Jackson and Martinez stood alone. The internal affairs investigation proved merciless. Investigators discovered prior complaints against both officers, incidents buried by sympathetic supervisors, patterns of disproportionate stops and searches of minority travelers. What began as an examination of a single incident expanded into a comprehensive audit of their entire careers. Martinez, the younger officer, broke first. During his disciplinary hearing, he sobbed openly, blaming Jackson's influence and the pressures of the job. His attorney negotiated frantically, offering full cooperation in exchange for leniency. It didn't save his badge. His termination became official 43 days after the incident, followed by civil rights charges that would drain his savings and force the sale of his home. Jackson, the veteran, fought longer but fell harder. His disciplinary record revealed a 20-year history of similar incidents with less powerful victims. His termination came with additional charges of evidence tampering, when investigators discovered he had attempted to alter his body camera settings after returning to the station. The prosecutor's office showed no mercy. They needed to demonstrate that justice operated equally for all, especially when one of their own had been victimized. Criminal trials followed. The courtroom dynamics proved particularly ironic. Though Judge Wilson properly recused herself, many of her colleagues knew her personally. Every judge who presided over related proceedings had at some point worked alongside her, attended conferences with her, or cited her respected opinions. Martinez accepted a plea deal, guilty to federal civil rights violations with a 2-year sentence. Jackson, refusing to admit wrongdoing until the end, faced a jury trial and received 7 years. Eleanor Campbell didn't escape consequences either. Judge Wilson's personal civil lawsuit against her proceeded methodically, resulting in a substantial financial judgment. More damaging was Campbell's permanent expulsion from the airline's elite status program and placement on a security watch list that made every subsequent airport experience an exercise in ironic justice. The airport police department underwent mandatory comprehensive bias training. New policies required officers to document specific evidence-based reasons for any passenger questioning. Body cameras became mandatory for all interactions. 5 years later, Jackson remains incarcerated in a federal correctional facility, where he works in the prison library. Martinez, released after 18 months for good behavior, lives with his parents in another state, unable to find stable employment with his record. Both men's law enforcement careers are permanently over. Their most enduring legacy, however, is in legal education. The Wilson incident, as it became known, is now a mandatory case study in police academy training nationwide. A stark warning about the consequences of racial profiling and abuse of power, regardless of the victim's status. The ripple effects of the Wilson incident extended far beyond the fates of Jackson and Martinez. As Judge Wilson returned to her chambers in the Federal Court of Appeals, she found herself at a crossroads. She could allow this trauma to remain a personal wound or transform it into meaningful change. She chose the latter. 6 months after the incident, Judge Wilson established the Judicial Equity Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to documenting, analyzing, and addressing racial discrimination within America's transportation systems. The organization's first major project was a comprehensive study of airport security interactions across 20 major U.S. airports, revealing disturbing patterns of disproportionate stops, searches, and detainments of passengers of color. The data proved what many had experienced but few could systematically demonstrate. Black and brown travelers were 4.7 times more likely to be questioned by security personnel, despite no statistical difference in actual security threats. The findings became the foundation for congressional testimony that ultimately led to new federal guidelines for airport security practices. Meanwhile, the airport where the incident occurred underwent its own transformation. The chief of airport police, who had been initially defensive during the investigation, was replaced by a reform-minded commander who implemented what became known as the Wilson Protocols: mandatory de-escalation training, strict documentation requirements for all passenger encounters, and quarterly audits of stop data reviewed by an independent civilian oversight board. For the officers themselves, life continued its harsh lessons. Martinez, upon his release, attempted to rebuild. He first found work as a night security guard at a warehouse, where his past remained unknown until a coworker recognized him from news coverage. After losing that position, he cycled through menial jobs, each ending similarly once his identity surfaced. The persistent shame followed him even after relocating across the country. In an unexpected development, Martinez eventually found purpose working with a restorative justice program, speaking to police academy recruits about his failures and the consequences of unchecked bias. His testimony, raw and remorseful, proved powerful, though it never erased his actions or fully redeemed him in the eyes of many. Jackson's journey proved darker. In prison, he initially maintained his innocence, insisting he was merely enforcing the law as trained. This narrative crumbled slowly under the weight of isolation and reflection. 3 years into his sentence, he suffered a minor stroke, which doctors attributed partly to chronic stress. The health crisis prompted his first genuine letter of apology to Judge Wilson, a 12-page handwritten document examining his own prejudices and acknowledging the harm he had caused. Judge Wilson never responded directly, but allowed the letter to be included in the training materials distributed by her organization. Eleanor Campbell's social standing disintegrated as swiftly as her legal defenses. The substantial financial settlement, directed entirely to scholarships for minority law students, was merely the beginning of her penalties. Her country club membership was quietly not renewed. Former friends gradually stopped returning calls. Her daughter, a corporate attorney, publicly distanced herself through a social media statement supporting Judge Wilson and denouncing racism, even when it comes from within one's own family. The airline industry itself faced scrutiny. Major carriers implemented new complaint protocols requiring multiple levels of verification before security personnel could be summoned for passenger disputes. Gate agents received enhanced training on recognizing and interrupting bias-motivated complaints. Perhaps most significantly, the Wilson incident entered legal casebooks and law school curricula nationwide. What began as one woman's humiliation became a landmark teaching moment about the intersection of race, authority, and justice in America. 5 years after the handcuffs had cut into her wrists, Judge Wilson returned to that same airport, this time to deliver the keynote address at the unveiling of a new training center for airport personnel. A center focused specifically on equitable treatment of all travelers. In her address, she never mentioned Jackson or Martinez by name, focusing instead on systems rather than individuals. True justice, she told the assembled crowd, isn't measured by how harshly we punish wrongdoers, but by how effectively we prevent the next injustice. The handcuffs that once restrained me have become the catalyst for restraining something far more dangerous: the unconscious biases that continue to divide us. The cameras flashed, capturing her dignified profile against the backdrop of the terminal where her humiliation had occurred, now transformed into a symbol of incremental, hard-won progress.